Hello. The focus of this video is the presidency, which is discussed in Chapter 10. So please make sure you read the assigned reading before attempting any other assignments for the week. But I want to talk a little bit about the American presidency and its powers in the Constitution. So the presidency is part of Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution. Article 2 established the executive branch, and it put the president in the leadership role of the executive branch. So the president is the chief executive of our government. He or she is in charge of the government. And by the way, I always say he or she, even though we have not yet had a woman serve as president, although we do have a woman as vice president, but we've never had a woman serve as president. It's inevitable that we will have a woman president, and so it's important that when referring to presidents, unless you're referring to a specific president, that we refer to them as he or she, since we will eventually have a woman serving as president. The Constitution does not prohibit it. It's just that we've never elected a woman as president. And it's fairly unusual because most countries in the world, of both democratic countries as well as non-democratic countries, have had women leaders as chief of state, but that has not been the case yet in the United States. Again, the presidency is listed in the Constitution. The powers of the presidency are not very specific in the Constitution. The main responsibility that he or she has is to carry out the laws of the nation, to faithfully execute the laws. That's part of the president's oath. But the question is, what does it mean to carry out the laws of the nation? Early presidents didn't think that they had a lot to do. So, with some exceptions, such as George Washington or Abraham Lincoln, the rest of the presidents of our early history didn't do a whole lot. And that was because they had the feeling they didn't have much to do. They said the Constitution doesn't give us very many specific powers, and so they didn't do a lot. That changed in the 20th century. So we're talking about the early 1900s, a little over 100 years ago. Beginning with Theodore Roosevelt in 1901, and then really accelerating under Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was the cousin of Theodore Roosevelt. So Theodore Roosevelt was a Republican president who served from 1901 to 1909. And then a little over 20 some years later, Theodore Roosevelt's cousin, Franklin D. Roosevelt, a Democrat, took office, and he ended up being the longest serving president in our history. He served for 12 years. The two Roosevelts really kind of implemented an idea that presidents really could go beyond the Constitution. They couldn't go against the Constitution, but as long as there wasn't something prohibited in the Constitution, they were allowed to do it. So presidents became much more active in carrying out their powers. It was both Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt who really accelerated the use of the executive order. So an executive order is when the president issues a direction to the federal government to do something. And because the federal government is quite large, anytime the president issues one of those orders, it has an impact beyond the federal government. An example of this was when President Truman in the 1940s desegregated the military. Remember, one of the roles of the president is commander in chief. He or she is in charge of the military. And Harry Truman, who succeeded Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman issued an order to desegregate the military so that there would no longer be racial segregation in the military ranks. And that was a big deal because at that time, the southern states were still segregated at the state level, but this was saying that the military would no longer be segregated. And then eventually laws were passed to desegregate other aspects of life. So that desegregation in the military became a model for desegregation in other ways. Presidents have issued orders on many topics over the years. And those orders are really important because it's the president directing the government to do something, and it has the force of law. Now, presidents cannot do something that goes against a law, and they cannot go against the Constitution, but the courts have given them broad authority to carry out their responsibilities. So presidents have issued orders to expand healthcare access through existing laws, but again, to expand healthcare access to deal with immigration issues. Now, some presidents have been more restrictive on immigration, while others have been more open about it. But again, they've used existing powers, existing laws to do that. Presidents have a number of responsibilities, a number of roles, which are discussed in Chapter 10. For example, the president is the chief executive. He or she is in charge of the executive branch of our government. That's the most important responsibility with the president, along with being commander in chief of the military. Presidents also serve as chief diplomat. That means they're in charge of our foreign policy. Presidents are the chief legislator of our government, meaning that they have one of the most important roles with regard to passing legislation or bills. Presidents, for example, can recommend legislation to Congress in the State of the Union address each year, and they also are very involved in deciding whether to approve or not approve a bill passed by Congress. And under the Constitution, the Congress can override a presidential veto of a bill, but it takes a two-thirds majority of both the House and the Senate, which is not easy to achieve. So presidents usually are sustained when they veto a bill. So chief legislator is important. President is also the head of his or her political party, chief of party. That's a more informal role, but the president has a major responsibility for the political aspects of his or her job. So, as I mentioned, the president is involved in the legislative process, and of course, it's a lot easier for a president if they have a Congress that's led by the same party that the president is. So, if you have a Democratic president, the Democratic president would much rather have a Democratic House and Senate. A Republican president would much rather have a Republican House and Senate. And we certainly have had times over the years where one party, the president's party, was in the majority in both houses. But we've also had many times when the president was facing an opposing party. So the president was one party, and one or both houses of Congress were controlled by the opposing party. The other thing about that is that even when the president's party is in the majority in the House or the Senate, they still have to deal with the rules of those chambers. And one of the frustrating things that presidents have had to face is in the U.S. Senate is the filibuster. That's discussed in Chapter 9, but that's the ability of a senator to literally talk a bill to death or refuse to allow the Senate to move forward on any other legislation. And so they will hold the floor as a way, or at least use this as a procedure to stop a bill from being considered. So even if the president's party is in the majority, if they don't have at least 60 seats in the Senate, which is the number of votes you need to get past a filibuster, the reality is the president's going to have a hard time getting his or her bills through the Senate. So there has been discussion about reforming the rules of the Senate. The filibuster is a unique tool in the Senate. It doesn't exist in the House, but it's a tool that exists for the minority party in the Senate. And again, it takes 60 votes to stop a filibuster. So let's say that you don't have 60 members of that president's party in the Senate, which usually is not the case. The last time that happened was when President Obama was in office over 10 years ago. The reality is that if you're a minority party member and you have at least 41 seats in the Senate or more, you're going to be successful in stopping the opposing party's priorities. So there has been discussion about changing the rules of the Senate to either do away completely with the filibuster, which is called the nuclear option, or to have some reform of the filibuster so that a minority party senator who wanted to stop a bill would actually physically have to stay on the floor of the Senate and keep talking. Because the way it works right now is if a senator from the opposing party threatens a filibuster, that's enough to stop the bill from being considered. They don't actually make them go through the process of actually talking the bill to death. But the feeling is that maybe if they required the senator to actually talk on the floor and hold the floor, that he or she would be less likely to want a filibuster because it would involve a major sacrifice. Right now, there's not much sacrifice; they just have to threaten, and nothing, and then that stops the bill. So that is something that's being considered. The majority party, which is again, the majority parties do change in the Senate, but the current majority party is considering making changes to the Senate rules that would allow make it easier for to get past filibusters or make them harder for the party that wants to engage in them. So that can make life difficult for the president, whichever party they happen to be. But the bottom line is that a president would definitely much rather have unified control, even if the filibuster still exists. So a number of other things about the presidency. Presidents do make appointments to their cabinet and to the courts, but those appointments do have to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate by a majority vote. Presidents negotiate treaties with foreign countries, but those have to be approved by the Senate by a 2/3 vote. And of course, if the president wants to spend money on anything, if the president wants money for a stimulus, an economic stimulus, or to do a specific project, such as healthcare, or a few years ago when President Trump was in office, he attempted to build a wall with Mexico. That has to be done through Congress. The president can't just on his or her own say, I'm going to do this. President Obama, when he wanted to expand healthcare, had to go through Congress. Same with President Trump with the border wall. Same with President Biden and the COVID relief packages. So presidents have a lot of power. They exercise their power much more strongly today than they used to, but there are still important checks through Congress, the House and the Senate, that limit what the president can do. So please make sure you read through Chapter 10 to understand the roles of the president and also the role of the vice president. The vice president serves with the president, and she or he is responsible for presiding over the Senate and breaking tie votes in the Senate, although most of the responsibilities of the vice president occur in the executive branch. And modern vice presidents are very active in working with the president on the president's priorities. So if you have any questions, please email me, and have a great week. Thank you.